Invincible Season 4 continues its incredibly strong streak with Episode 7, bringing the Viltrumite War to Viltrum itself, and finally elevating Thragg to the character he was hyped up to be. While obviously our main characters play huge roles, this episode is largely framed around Thetis and Thragg, with Nolan wedged between them, and delivers genuinely some of the craziest, jaw-dropping moments of the entire series. Truly top tier on the suspense meter. I was on the edge of my seat the entire episode, and heck, I'm still kinda on the edge of my seat because next week looks to be crazy as well. Let's dive into Invincible Season 4, Episode 7, Don't Do Anything Rash. And obviously, the briefest reminder, I am not spoiling ahead in the comics for myself like many fans of the show, so please just keep that in mind when commenting. Thanks so much. Now obviously, Season 4 of Invincible is nearing its conclusion soon, but I have a great way to tide you over before Season 5, Invincible Guarding the Globe, the official Invincible mobile game. This is a squad-based RPG from Ubisoft that lets you utilize all of your favorite characters from Invincible, heroes, villains, and everyone in between. It's a really fun game to play in short bursts when you have the time, prioritizing team management and strategy in bloody, action-packed battles. And even beyond the gameplay, Invincible Guarding the Globe actually follows its own original storyline that follows the timeline of the TV show. You help Cecil investigate a mysterious army of clones of all of your favorite Invincible characters no less. On top of that, new heroes are released in the game as they make their breakout appearances in the series, so it's a great game to play as you follow along with the show. This season we've already seen the introduction of Dinosaurus and Space Racer, and I think a certain Grand Regent feels like a likely candidate to be on the horizon. This season also introduced Cecil's nightmare simulations that allow you to participate in big battles that have already played out in the show. There truly is just so much to play here, so use my QR code or link in the description. You can actually instantly receive Omni-Man and Conquest free to use in the game. Thanks so much to Invincible Guarding the Globe for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out the game if you're looking for more Invincible action beyond these new episodes. Now, let's get back to the breakdown. This episode starts with what I found to be one of the most interesting things we've seen in maybe the entire series, a flashback to Argal-era Viltrum, showcasing the events leading up to Argal's assassination. And honestly, what I find most interesting about it is that it's not particularly climactic. The assassination itself, at least. First, we see what appears to be a Viltrumite work camp on a conquered world as they mine resources, which is sabotaged with explosives from the oppressed species, which leads to a major conference of Viltrum's council, including Thetis. Thetis is becoming a more fascinating character to me the more we learn, because despite the fact that he is the one who kills Argal and created the Scourge virus, he still feels very Viltrumite in a sort of more honorable flavor. Not to put honor on the Viltrumite way of life, but it's all relative. Where the council seeks to punish this enslaved planet for this act of rebellion, Thetis is confused because he sees this rebellion as an act of strength that should actually be appreciated according to the Viltrumite way of life. It certainly highlights a major divide between how Argal runs things and how Thetis views their way of life. Thragg effectively claims that this rebellion was not an act of true strength, that as a species, they are simply weaker. More or less, he's just laying out what is clearly the philosophy of the Viltrumites we have come to understand, that Viltrumites are the strongest beings in the universe. They find all other life forms offensive for not living up to that strength. Thetis, while still certainly somebody who subscribes to Viltrum's conquering imperial ways, seems to look at a larger picture. He sees value in the strength other beings can provide. They're just all different flavors of fascism. Argal orders the reduction of 25% of the rebelling planet's population and full-on eradication if they're met with any more resistance. I guess based on Thetis' reaction here, this is the first time they've taken that kind of a drastic action. Though, in Thragg's conversation with Argal after this, he claims Thetis was previously the most ruthless Viltrumite he fought with before Thetis spent time in a specific quadrant. And I wonder if there was some kind of specific event that changed Thetis, or if it's all just pointing to the same truth we've seen from Nolan's experience, that spending time outside of Viltrum's indoctrination umbrella changes you, that simply having closer, more personal experiences with quote-unquote lesser species slowly makes them realize that their way of life is indefensible. Although we also know that there are lots of Viltrumites all over the galaxy, so who knows how they're doing. I will say, Thragg's conversation with Argal about Thetis, combined with the fact that this episode made a point to show Thetis assassinate Argal, it pretty blatantly forecasted Thetis' ultimate fate in the episode, but we'll get there later. Okay, let's talk about Thragg, since I know you all want to. After a, for lack of a better term, punk-ass introductory episode last week, Thragg basically came to party this week. as expected and fully stated and predicted in last week's video, but this video aged like milk comments will certainly ignore that fact. It's fine, give me the engagement. But here's the thing, that sort of patheticness that I really latched onto in Thragg's appearance last week really didn't go away here. It just kind of properly blended itself into the character in a way that makes him both a little pathetic and overwhelmingly imposing, instead of just pathetic. After Argal's assassination, Thragg basically orders a purge, a planet-wide civil brawl, weeding out the weaker Viltrumites. On its face, this reads as a way to strengthen the core of the planet and a way to really impose authority as the new Grand Regent, but I think there's a lot more to Thragg's actions here on a personal level. We see that Thragg was more or less raised to be Argal's right-hand man. Mark says later in the episode that he was trained from birth to be the strongest Viltrumite, and all of Thragg's actions thus far read more as an act of vengeance for what happened to Argal than as a concerted effort to lead Viltrum. Now, by the true Viltrumite way, Argal being murked would probably mean that he just was not worthy of being the Emperor. He was weak, he failed to survive. But despite this being Thragg's Viltrumite philosophy outwardly, it seems clear that Thragg's vengeance is personal. He is genuinely and deeply distraught over Argal's death, and I think that Viltrumite purge was basically the first act of vengeance, even if it was misplaced. Last week, I really got a kick out of Thragg clutching to that emotional support skull of Argal, but if you take into account the idea that Thragg saw Argal as a pseudo-father figure, and that everything he has done since then is vengeance driven in his name, it actually makes him a much more interesting character, because that is sort of a lame motivator for such an imposing, powerful force, particularly given what we know about Viltrumites. Don't get me wrong, Thragg is certainly shown to be smarter and more adept in this episode. He is a deeply dangerous threat, but his motivations are much more human. And that is the great irony of Thragg, right? He is the leader of an entire culture that values pure conquering strength over any personal connection, and yet he is being completely driven by a personal connection. Ultimately, he is much more like those he seeks to conquer and destroy than he would ever admit. An immensely powerful hypocrite, I guess. I also found it really interesting that Thetis called out Thragg for his failure in seeing the longer game in that initial conference scene, and then all of his attacks on Viltrum exploited that fact. Thragg's Viltrumite purge was initially overconfident, but Thetis' scourge virus taking out the vast majority of the species after this makes it look particularly short-sighted. I will also say maybe the most relieving part of this episode after last week is that Lee Pace's performance instantly hit for me. Even just in this opening flashback, he maintains the calmer, more calculated performance it felt like they were going for, but this time feels genuinely imposing and authoritative. I've obviously got a lot more to say about Thragg as we move further into the episode, but let's get to the present timeline as the squad preps for their surprise attack on Viltrum. I liked the melancholy tone as everyone sat with their anxiety heading to Viltrum, but not unlike the whole Thetis situation, I really felt like they were forecasting a bit too much with Oliver's nonchalant attitude. The moment he started taking Thragg lightly, I was like, well shit, what's gonna happen to our boy? Mark at least verbalizes that this incoming threat felt different, and that's coming off of him needing 2 months to heal from his takedown of Conquest. But I enjoyed the gang realizing that this bowl of slop might actually be the last meal they ever eat. Pretty bleak. Though hidden within that bleakness is Oliver casually revealing that he wishes he was eating Paul's spaghetti. It's cute that though Oliver sort of treats Paul like he's a boring normie, here in this heavy moment, he actually specifically thinks about a way where Paul has enriched his life. Been saying it all season, but Oliver's come a long way. Probably the best pre-Viltrum scene is Nolan and Thetis' conversation here, as Nolan tries to point out that even if they take out Thragg, the remaining Viltrumites will be a major threat. And obviously, reading between the lines, Thetis is suggesting that he will absolutely be using Scourge 2.0 to take them out. Nolan's response here, I think, is very telling in regards to his journey, though. He is no longer deeply offended by the mere suggestion of using the Scourge. He really is only worried about one thing, the well-being of his children if the Scourge is released. And man, if that isn't an illustration of the change in the guy, I don't know what is. But the end of the episode also suggests that this dilemma might get a lot crazier for Nolan specifically, but we'll talk about that later. I also really loved this little family moment between the Graysons before the battle, with Nolan struggling to verbalize his love for them, but Oliver hugging him anyways. The fact that Oliver gets to have this kind of comforting moment with a father figure is sweet, despite Nolan's history. After this, the vast majority of the episode, as you might expect, is filled with interconnected fight sequences, and they are mostly pretty cool, though I do think that in general, fights in space feel a little less dynamic than they do do on a planet, given that terrain isn't much of a factor. Though the terrain that is a factor is the massive floating sea of Viltrumite corpses, and having the whole gang have to actually wade through this sea of corpses was masterfully dark, and made even more impactful by one of my favorite details in the episode, that Thragg's gang of Viltrumites were all pretending to be some of those corpses, waiting for our heroes to approach. So cool. Alright, let's get back to Thragg. Finally, this was the aura I had come to expect from the way people talked about the character, patiently waiting for the group of would-be assassins to confront him on his home turf. Pretty cool. Nothing like what we saw last week, frankly. And the way he just sort of stays perfectly still watching as the battle plays out before him, definitely badass. For the most part, there are some very cool moments in the space battle. I like that Tech Jacket has limited poison darts, which are very effective and therefore wildly valuable. That adds stakes to every time she shoots one. Kind of stupid that she didn't save one for Thragg, but oh well. Also, for anyone who was arguing Tech Jacket shouldn't have been a part of the team, that helmet save on Space Racer, that was one of the most important moments in the entire battle. Dude would have straight up died if it weren't for Tech Jacket. She's not gonna take out a Viltrumite one-on-one, but her skill set is undeniably valuable. Speaking of Space Racer, really enjoyed his entrance, looking like one of those dog walkers with 6 pups attached to their belt, except it's 6 space lizards attached to a motorcycle. That being said, man, this show feels so funny sometimes. The weight and stakes of this fight juxtaposed with hearing Nolan shout Space Racer fully seriously, it just makes me giggle. And while so much of this episode is just pretty solidly cool fight sequences, to me the best stuff always lies in the character interactions. After we get our first real sense of Thragg's power, punching Nolan all the way to Viltrum's surface, he meets him there for one of my favorite scenes in the episode. Surprise, surprise, I like the talking more than the fighting. With this discussion, we get basically the first moment where Thragg loses composure and drops the calm, calculated demeanor. Nolan says Viltrum is a tomb, and Thragg just fully flips out over it, just for one single line. But it is clear that Thragg, for all of his power and might, is in a bit of denial. Barely 40 Viltrumites left, and he still thinks they can restore the planet to its former glory. But I think we can see now that while this might be Thragg's eventual hope, he is clearly motivated by revenge for Argal. But I think it's not just revenge for his death, but like revenge for the death of what Argal stood for. Thragg's entire existence was built around the Viltrumite Empire, raised from birth for a singular purpose within that machine. And I think that is what makes this conversation with Nolan particularly interesting. Nolan's most biting line deliveries in these sequences are all about his new priorities. You aren't my family anymore, and the even angrier, like coming after my sons. To me, it's clear that Nolan's biggest motivator isn't fully righteous, it's simply that he wants to allow his kids a future. So even though this discourse between Nolan and Thragg includes these greater questions of right and wrong, neither are fully fighting for their own philosophy. They're fighting for their personal connections. Nolan for his new family, and Thragg for not only his fallen emperor, but for the way of life that his entire existence is built around. Less out of pure belief and more out of the fact that it's the only way he feels he fits into the universe. It's the only way his existence makes sense, which is ultimately why Nolan's big move after this hits so hard for Thragg, but we'll get there too. First, we gotta say, why Oliver? I mean, I knew this kid was gonna get his ass beaten the moment he started talking on the ship, but the way they executed this is masterfully suspenseful, largely because the audience and the characters just have no idea if he's alive after Thragg slices him. But I do like that at a certain point, it just becomes incredibly clear that they aren't taking down Thragg. He is not going to be stopped, and there has to be a different approach, which is absolutely the coolest animated and biggest hype moment of the season, as Space Racer's laser combined with Mark Nolan and Thetis more or less create like a Death Star nuke blast, just completely ripping through the entirety of Viltrum's core, destroying the planet from the inside out. Man, I generally feel like I have a good sense of what to expect from the larger picture in this show. I might not get everything right, but I can usually see how the structure of the season is likely to play out. And episode 7 ending with Viltrum's destruction, not on my bingo card. And obviously a real blow to Thragg's sense of self. He still seemed convinced they could restore the planet to its former level just like 10 minutes before this, which is definitely why this is the least composed we ever see the guy. Tears streaming out of his eyes as he fully takes out Thetis, finally. Which again, it was clear this would happen after the opening was the Argal assassination flashback, but I also think structurally and thematically this hits perfectly. Thetis was the one who knocked down the first domino leading to the downfall of Viltrum. the death of Argal, the Scourge virus. Now, only after he has literally dismantled the body of the planet itself is he eliminated. And not only that, Thragg fulfills his primary motivator, revenge for Argal, which couldn't be spelled out more clearly as he claims, "Emperor Argal, you are avenged," with Thetis' head in his hand. Obviously, this rage-filled Thragg is where we really start to see the extent of his abilities and ruthlessness. He has dropped the calm and calculated act and is acting on pure adrenaline-fueled anger. After he completely impales Nolan, you 100% fully feel Mark's fear as Thragg chases him down through space. Incredible suspenseful sequence. I did struggle at first to buy Thragg sparing Mark though based on our post-credit scene I could maybe see why he went this route, but in the moment I was like, why are you letting him live, dude? That doesn't make sense. I will say, with the way this played out, I don't think I ever had any real fear that Nolan or Oliver were done for yet, despite Thragg doing the trademark Viltrumite karate spike through the chest. I know anyone is at risk of death in this show, but sometimes you can just tell based on story placement and also how things are built up. This episode had a clear focus on Thetis and Thragg through its opening flashback, so it was clear that the focus would remain on them for the biggest moments. That being said, it does get a little tiresome when they give us these big gory sequences that seem like a death sequence and then just sort of undo it immediately. I do think the cliffhanger they landed on was the right one, but it is funny to quote-unquote end the episode with the Graysons all near death floating through space and then immediately in the post-credit sequence say, look, they're all okay. But the cliffhang is Mark's realization that Thragg and the remaining Viltrumites have almost certainly gone to Earth. A great suspenseful thought to end our episode on, and one that I think opens a ton of questions and possibilities, particularly given Earth's currently very tenuous state of being, lack of heroes and all. But I think it also raises a few questions. I could see Thragg going to Earth for two reasons. One, full-on revenge, once again just destroying Earth the way that Nolan and Mark destroyed Viltrum, or two, to conquer and take over. Now that Viltrum is gone, the Viltrumites need somewhere to raise their flag, right? And what better than the planet that those who destroyed Viltrumite care about most? And I guess this works because it's both a form of revenge and practical. Not to mention that they know that they could theoretically breed with the humans to create more Viltrumites. Scary thoughts all around. But for me, the most interesting question is in regards to Nolan, and it all goes back to that conversation with Thetis, and to a lesser extent with Thragg. Earth is fully at risk of destruction or takeover. The Viltrumites are going to unleash their fury. And now, without Thetis in the picture, the question of whether or not they use Scourge 2.0 is probably going to fall into Nolan's hands. It is possible that it will be up to Alan as he's the interim leader of the coalition, but Alan also has this close personal connection to Nolan, and I think regardless, the use of Scourge 2.0 is going to be on the table, and it's going to pose Nolan the most interesting questions. Questions that challenge both his evolving philosophy and his personal connections. Because while using the virus would undoubtedly save the home of his kids and of Debbie, all the people he cares about, as well as save the universe from further Viltrumite takeover, it also could fully kill his children. While Nolan's morals have shifted for the better for certain, his motivations are definitely rooted in his family. It feels like we are for sure setting the stage for a big Nolan breakdown in this pivotal decision. Or maybe not. Maybe Alan will just say, let's use it. We'll see. Now, obviously, I am very pleased that Thragg mostly lived up to the hype this week. And of course, I am enjoying the countless video aged like milk, apology video when comments on last week's video. But also, none of what happened this week really changes how he was portrayed last week. If anything, it actually kind of reaffirms my belief that they could have done a better job portraying Thragg in his big introductory episode. Ultimately, that episode simply made the guy look like a pathetic pushover, and I really think it needed like just one additional scene or some change to show even a hint of Thragg's power before he bailed, clutching his emotional support skull. The only reason I had any expectation that Thragg would be formidable this week is because of the general structure of the season, because of how the fans talk about him, and because of how the characters in the show talk about him, which is sort of just a classic blunderful case of tell don't show, isn't it? If I were to only look at Thragg's scenes from episode 6 in isolation, I would have had zero expectation that he would put up a fight in episode 7. And again, maybe that was actually what they were going for. Maybe they wanted to try and shock the audience with the bait and switch, but that doesn't work as well when every character is then also saying, Thragg is the most powerful guy I've ever seen in my life. People really want me to walk back the last video, but given the fact that I pretty explicitly stated that I knew Thragg's biggest moments would be coming this week, it doesn't really feel like I have much to walk back. Everything I said was true. But ultimately, I am mostly just happy that the character is is cool and compelling, even if his introduction left a bit to be desired. Lee Pace's performance really felt outstanding in this one, all around, in both the calm, collected demeanor and unhinged rage moments. And I am so curious which version of him we'll see arrive on Earth, because they are in a rough spot right now. Will all of the Earth stories coalesce into this one? Will Robot and Monster Girl return from the Flaxen dimension? If they do, they would have all of those mechs that are actually built to fight Viltrumites. That would be pretty useful. Is Eve still pregnant, or is she actually going to be able to fight? How poorly are those Invincible Reanimen going to fare against actual Viltrumites? Truly, lots on the table. Cecil has got his work cut out for him. And that is about all I've got for you this week. Hey, I actually also recorded a little reaction to the entire episode that I cut down and will be posting on my Johnny 2 Casual channel. Check that out if you're interested. But let me know how you guys felt about the episode. How's Thragg's aura feel after this one? Let me know below in the comments, and stay tuned next week for more. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny 2 Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny 2 Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.